Joe, and thanks everybody for turning up tonight. It's great to look out into this audience and see friends and comrades old and new. I've been in this hall many a time at the Joe Green and Dave Jones Memorial Lecture. And what fantastic speakers you've had at that over the years. I remember seeing Dennis Skinner speak in this very room more than once. Ian Lavery, before he became an MP, and of course on one of the big anniversaries of the strike, I remember the former NUM President Arthur Scargill speaking in here, someone who's often criticised by commentators not fit to lace his boots as a socialist or trade union leader, in my opinion. So I'm pleased to be with you all this evening, but I want to start with words not from somebody from our movement. I want to start with words from Ian McGregor. Words that he wrote in a letter to miners during the miners' strike. In this letter, mailed to the home of every miner in this country, he said, what this strike is really about is that the NUM leadership is preventing the development of an efficient industry. He went on to say, in this letter, which didn't age well, this is a strike which should never have happened. It is based on a very serious misrepresentation and distortion of the facts. At great financial cost, miners have supported the strike for 14 weeks because your leaders have told you this, that the coal board is out to butcher the coal industry, that we plan to do away with 70,000 jobs, that we plan to close down around 86 pits, leaving only 100 working collieries. McGregor then went on to say, if these things were true, I would not blame miners for getting angry or being deeply worried. But these things are absolutely untrue. I state that categorically and solemnly. You have been deliberately misled. And that letter should be read again and again by those who condemn the miners for going on strike, by those who condemn the leadership of the National Union of Mine Workers, by those that condemn the Transport and General Workers Union and ASLEF for showing solidarity with those miners. And what McGregor said as well, and his autobiography is worth buying, second hand of course. He wouldn't want anybody going to his heirs and descendants, not to be bitter, but he ends his book, or towards the end of the book it says, it simply does not bear thinking about what might have been were it not for those brave fighters. And by those brave fighters, he's talking about people like the UDM. He's talking about people like Roy Link. He's talking about people like the strikebreaker, Patrick McLaughlin, who ended up as a Conservative MP, most recently supporting Theresa May and Boris Johnson. Those are the people he referred to as brave fighters. He said, imagine if the bullies had won. Imagine if the thugs now had the industry to themselves. How much mercy would they have shown to those who dared to disagree? Sadly, many of them are still here, even now, skulking in corners, waiting for the chance to put razor blades in a man's pit-bath soap, or ruin his street clothes, or urinate in his snap tin. That's what he said about striking miners. But it's always been the case that when working class communities stand up to fight for a better society, they get demonised by the establishment. Whether it's McGregor, whether it's the Sun, whether it's Thatcher, whether it's the Daily Mail, the story is the same throughout our history. It happened to Arthur, it happened to McGuckin, it happened to Jeremy Corbyn, it happened to Tony Benn, it happened to the women against pit closures. It happens to each and every individual and movement that stands up and fights for a better society. But I'm proud of the legacy of struggle that the National Union of Mine Workers and the Women Against Pit Closures left us. I grew up listening to stories about the strike. I was born in 1980. Not that I remember it, but I was taken at the age of 4 to a picket line by my dad, a teacher who went to the picket lines in West Yorkshire before going to school each morning. And there used to be a video, but we've lost it, of me on his shoulders. And I remember, however, being 10, 11 and 12 years old, hearing stories from my auntie, who was a member of the Women Against Pit Closures, married to a striking man. I remember hearing stories about that strike. And that's what got me interested in politics in the first place. Why? Because it was a very clear example of what happens when working class communities rise up to protect their standard of living, but also to fight for a better society. And if one thing I'm sick of from our trade union movement, and I was a trade union lawyer for 10 years before becoming the Labour Member of Parliament for my own home constituency, there's one thing I'm sick of, is all the armchair commentators, all the armchair generals, even from our movement, saying what the miners should have done, what they shouldn't have done, and all the rest of it. Thank goodness the NUM did what it did. Thank goodness the Women Against Pit Closures did what they did. They had no choice, or rather, they did have a choice. They had a choice whether to fight back, or they had a choice whether just to give up. And those who give up in the face of the establishment leave as their legacy to our movement absolutely nothing. But those who fight back leave a legacy of inspiration for others to take up that cause going ahead. And so that honourable dispute, that most honourable dispute, inspired me and inspired countless other people of my generation to become involved in socialist politics. I was lucky that the National Union of Mine Workers, when Ian Lavery was president, allowed me as a young man to go to their weekend schools in Scarborough, in Scalby and elsewhere. So the National Union of Mine Workers can take the credit or can take the blame for the fact that I'm in Labour's shadow cabinet and so active for the socialist cause. And if you look at the history, I know that you don't need telling this, many of you will have been on strike. I can see heroes from the Women Against Pit Closures here. Betty and Betty Cook and Anne Scargill, let's a round of applause for them. You don't need lecturing by me about it, but if you look at the history of that strike, it showed the best of our movement. It showed the internationalism of our movement. People will remember the fact that the French trade unions and the French Communist Party worked very closely with the National Union of Mine Workers. People like Alan Simon, when they were sending toys and food provisions over to this country. People remember that even the South African National Union of Mine Workers sent a solidarity donation from apartheid Africa in support for workers in struggle in this country. How inspiring, how inspiring. And we remember as well, as I mentioned before, the heroism of the Women Against Pit Closures. A lot of rubbish was talked about the miners because it had to be. They had to try and turn the public against the National Union of Mine Workers. The truth is, it was class politics laid bare. Class politics always goes on, sometimes hidden, sometimes more open. But all the miners' strike did was lay bare the class forces in operation in our society. It showed what the capitalist state was prepared to do to working class communities who fought back. Joe, can you pass me my paper, please? There's some more quotes that I think you don't have to open it. You just pass it to me. It's fine. Thanks very much. And Seamus Milne put it well in his book, The Enemy Within, The Secret War Against the Miners, when he said, by any reckoning, the miners' strike of 1984 to 85 was a watershed in post-war British history. Indeed, it has had no real parallel in size, duration and impact anywhere in the world. The disputes pitted the most powerful and politicised trade union in the country against a hard-right Tory administration bent on class revenge and prepared to lay waste to our industrial heartlands and energy sector in the process, regardless of the cost. It convulsed Britain, turning mining areas into occupied territory, and came far closer, it was understood at the time, to breaking the Thatcher government's onslaught on organised labour. Let's not forget what NACODs did. That could have ended up seeing the victory of the 1984 to 85 miners' strike. People shouldn't forget that NACODs voted by 82%, to remember correctly, to take industrial action themselves. If that had happened and for some reason it didn't, then the strike would have been won. But that strike showed the best of our communities. It showed solidarity. As the people have put it before me, it demonstrated a miner close to retirement, prepared to lose the last year of pay of the last year of his working life, prepared to risk his home and his mortgage for someone, a young miner he'd never even met in a mining village in Wales or somewhere else, someone that he'd never ever met. That's the truth. It was the most honourable dispute in our history. And I do think that those that lecture about balance, that those that lecture about tactics are in fact trying to cover up for their own guilt in betraying the striking miners when they most needed their support and most needed their solidarity. Of course it's true that Neil Kinnock let the miners down. Of course it's true that the TUC let the miners down. Of course it's true that many in the upper echelons of the trade union and labour movement let the miners down because they didn't perhaps understand what was at stake. It was a complete watershed. It wasn't just about the survival of the mining industry. It wasn't just about the well-being of all those mining villages. It was about the very nature of our society. Are some things more important than profit? Are some things more important than market forces? And we're living with the legacy of that letdown still today. When you consider the number of 0 hours contracts, that's because of the outcome of the miners' strike. When you consider the proliferation of insecure employment, that is because of the outcome of the miners' strike. When you think of the way that low wages, poverty pay has crept across this country, that too is a legacy of the outcome of the miners' strike. A strike that could have been won had the labour and trade union movement supported it like it should have done. But of course, there were people in our trade union movement, people like Ron Todd, people like Bill Roxley and others who really gave their all and delivered the support. And of course, rank and file members of the Labour Party, people who weren't members of any party, people who were members of the left parties and rank and file trade unionists did all they can during that year. So we should be proud, but we should see the miners' strike as unfinished business. Because what the miners' strike was about trying to secure a society that wasn't just about the pursuit of profit. The kind of society where people came first. And that is a goal that we still pursue. That is a goal that we still pursue. Whether it is calling for a full inquiry into what happened at Albury, or whether it is, as we had in our last Labour manifesto, saying that we'll repeal all the trade union laws, and not only do that, but put in place, as we would have done had we won that election, a Ministry of Employment Rights to give trade unions and workers the rights that they deserve. All of these things mean that the miners' strike is a piece of unfinished business. But people need to study the way that the establishment worked during that strike. It's illustrative. As I said before, just as the striking miners and leaders of that dispute were demonised, so more recently we've seen the leader of the Labour Party, Jeremy Corbyn, demonised. We've seen Labour Party members demonised as well. And it should be noted, and this was revealed in The Guardian of all places in 2005, that Stella Rimington, the former head of MI5 has admitted that the agency targeted union leaders during the strike. People should understand just what the establishment was prepared to do. But so many inspirational acts occurred. How can we forget, for example, when those unionised print workers refused to print that front page which showed Scargill giving what appeared to be a Hitler salute when he was waving at pickets. It all seems very familiar. Our trade union movement isn't as strong now as it was then. That was the whole point of the government taking on the National Union of Mine Workers. They wanted to break socialist, class-conscious trade unionism. But our movement is far from dead. Just look at the strike funds that Unite the Union has put in place and has never condemned any strike action by any of its members since Len McCluskey became leader of that union. Just look at the work that the Bakers, Food and Allied Workers Union are doing. Unionising workplaces, he said, couldn't be unionised, and taking strike action and protest action in those workplaces, whether it be McDonald's and the McStrike or whether it be Wetherspoons. So this is part of our movement's legacy. These banners inspire us still. And I think it's important that even though our movement faces defeats, that we never retreat on our socialist principles. Never retreat on our socialist principles. Let's not ever, as a movement, go back to the days where we have Labour Party leaders who don't dare to say they support workers taking strike action. Let's not go back to the days when we only oppose Tory austerity. Let's not go back to the days when we support cuts as long as they don't go too far, too fast. Let's not go back to the days of Labour leaders saying these strikes are wrong. Let's not go back to the days of Labour leaders not knowing whose side they are on. But that is a task for all of us. In fulfilling that task, we can honour the great heroes from that strike. We can honour the striking members of the National Union of Mine Workers. We can honour the inspiring members of Women Against Pit Closures. And of course, a special mention has to be made of those heroes in the Nottinghamshire coalfield. How inspiring today. They had the worst of all worlds. They had the financial penury. The financial penury of being on strike. And they had the trauma of being treated like scabs, by scabs in their own community. So they need to be remembered. And so if we think that our struggle is tough when we're facing the establishment, we should remember what people went through in that year. I think it's fantastic that the All Grey Truth and Justice campaign is still going on. I think it's fantastic that in a room where I've already seen pictures of Joe Green and Dave Jones, who died as pickets during the strike. It's fantastic that we still honour their memory. I think it's fantastic that I look around this room and see not just heroes from the strike, but younger people as well, determined to get justice for the people involved in that strike, but determined above all to build a better world. Because anybody can make fine socialist speeches. The test is, when it comes to the crunch, what do we do about it? With this Conservative victory, they have the trade union movement and the Labour movement in their sights. They're looking, I think we all know, at the prospect of banning strike action in transport and maybe other sectors as well. We've got to resist that. We've got to remain socialist. We've got to remain supporters of proud, fighting trade unionism. And I think in this modern age of 0 hours contracts, of the Americanisation really of our employment sector, we can all take great inspiration from the heroes of the National Union of Mine Workers and the Women Against Pit Closures. I'm sorry that I couldn't see the film. I look forward to watching it later. I was at my constituency Labour Party meeting earlier tonight. But I'll finish on this. The words of an honorary member of the National Union of Mine Workers, Tony Benn, who said, "We're not here just to manage capitalism, we're here to change society." And when I see the NUM banner of the worker climbing up the steps of the different progressive policies to reach the destination of socialism, I know which way I want to go. I know which way I want our movement to go. Thank you. Onwards to socialism, comrades.